Hello and welcome back to Aetheral Space 10.15 Muzazi. We are back.
Welcome.
This should be the penultimate of Arc 10.
Oh shit, it's already almost over. I'm gonna miss it. This was a good arc. This arc elevated Aether, in my opinion, to the God tier status. This was a brilliant fucking arc from start to finish. I'm really excited.
Thank you, I'm glad you liked it.
But enough sucking your cock. It's time to play the game.
Never enough, but okay.
This is how the hero comes. A toy Muzazi leaps out of the water, droplets flying in every direction, and charges at his opponent. Twin swords of blazing light protrude from his hands, and with his speed they become sheer blurs, bands of white that paint his path. He's so fast that his black and white hair clings to his scalp, waving behind him like a banner. I would suggest salt and pepper so you're not using black and white over and over. An ordinary opponent would be killed before they could so much as blink. Volte Kojiro blocks the first two slashes with one swing of his sword, an unsatisfied frown on his face. The opponent he had built up in his head would have been much faster than that. He retaliates with a slash that would have decapitated the toy Muzazi before, but this man, now awakened, easily dodges beneath it. Thrusters explode on Muzazi's knees as he leaps backwards, avoiding another slash from Balte's sword, and Balte pursues, growling in frustration. His future-seeing eyes are fixed on the radiance burning out of Muzazi's palms. They are the object of his ire. "Stop playing around, Negan!" he roars, charging after his adversary. "We both know you don't need tricks like that!" "That isn't my name!" Muzazi shouts back, swinging around in a roundhouse kick to catch the charging Kojiro off guard. Catching a man like that off guard is easier said than done, though. He sees it coming, obviously, and twists his body to slash at the exposed leg. Flash! A thruster burns out of Muzazi's thigh, blasting Balte in the face and sending the leg out of his range. As Balte grabs his burnt face, seething, Muzazi thrusts his two radiants forward in a pair of vicious stabs. "This isn't you, Negan!" Balte cried in an incomprehensible move. He tosses his Leviathan upwards out of his own hands.
This isn't
Muzazi's eyes automatically follow it for a single deadly instant. "Don't fuck with me!" Balte's hands lash out like vipers, striking the nerve clusters in both of Muzazi's shoulders. His arms drop down useless and limp, the radiance burning at and melting the metal floor, smoke drifting up from the damaged regions. Balte seizes Leviathan by the hilt again as it lands and swings it downwards, directly at Muzazi's skull. Flash! The radiance on Muzazi's palms vanish, and are immediately replaced by a bright blade that erupts from his forehead. It deflects Balte's downward blow, forcing him to step back, and it then immediately vanishes, the blades returning to Muzazi's hands. He rushes forward with a flurry of attacks, forcing Balte on the defensive, their swords clashing countless times in the span of just a few seconds. The despair that had previously consumed Muzazi's expression is gone now, replaced by a steely resolve. He understands it now. He understands the path to victory, and he's growing faster. Balte Kojiro's precognition is based upon reading muscle movement. A lingering memory had told him that. No matter how a toy Muzazi moves his body, it will be read. It is impossible to move without using your muscles, after all. Well, it's impossible for most people. "Full throttle!" Muzazi says. Thousands of tiny thrusters, too small to even be seen, sprout up over every inch of his body as he moves with their force, rather than his own strength. Immediately, Balte's eyes widen in surprise as his precognition is proven inaccurate, and he is forced to use his own skills to block the incoming blows, faster and faster, faster and faster, faster and faster, until first blood is drawn. It couldn't even be called an injury. It's nothing but the slightest scratch on Balte's cheek, barely even red, but the leader of the Seven Blades looks at it as if a toy Muzazi just ripped his heart out. His eyes are wide, bloodshot from fury. His hand, gripping his Leviathan, is white from pressure. Something between a choke and a growl pours out of his throat, and he speaks. "Fusion tool!" he rasps. "Leviathan!" Everything is consumed by a toxic emerald light. "I admired you more than anything, Negan. They say you were the best there ever was. Maybe even the best there ever will be. Even back then, before we met, everyone knew you were something special. Even I couldn't believe it when I met you. You used that sword like it was a pen, writing your will onto the world. It was beyond technique. It was like enlightenment. I felt lucky to even know you. You were like the sun, far, far too bright for eyes. It was ridiculous in the first place. Ridiculous to dream, and even more ridiculous to believe. An ordinary person like me, beating someone like you, a mere human standing up against the sun. You should have killed me, even for imagining it. So stop hiding, Negan. Stop wearing that fake face. There's no more need for it. We're here again, the way we should have been the first time. There's nothing standing in our way anymore. We can do it properly. Come on, come out, come here. Kill me and be killed by me. Negan! The haze of green aether cleared, revealing the new form Balte Kojiro had taken. It was a jagged form, pale, transparent crystals covering the entirety of his body, save for his exposed chest and the bottom of his face. Even with his eyes hidden, the wild, fanged grin was enough to show off his exhilaration. Tiny black spheres, like the pupils of eyes, floated around inside each crystal as if they were suspended in a liquid solution. As he looked on, radiance ready, Muzazi couldn't help but feel that the shape was atrocious. It was like Balte had thrown away the last vestiges of his warrior's dignity. His sword had vanished with the transformation, after all. Instead, he clenched fists, scraps of crystal flying off with each movement. "I'd really like you to know, Negan," Balte said, his voice warped and doubled by runaway aether. "I've really never felt better than I do right now." He moves his limbs experimentally, flexing and cracking his joints, the smile on his face almost intoxicating. Muzazi narrowed his eyes. "I've already told you. That isn't my name." Balte's grin faded, but not by much. "You can pretend all you want, Negan, but it's no use. I know you when I see you. I'll have you show yourself to me before long." "There's no point in talking to him any longer," Muzazi grimly decided, crouching low to the ground. "He's completely deluded himself." Giggling quietly, Balte lowered himself to the ground, matching Muzazi's stance. He too was ready to launch himself forward at a moment's notice. Win or lose, this would be the final clash. "I can see, Negan," Balte breathed. "I can see it all now, so much further. How everything will play out, how he'll... And with those words, the smile finally left his face. "Dissatisfied?" Muzazi asked. "Was the future not as you'd anticipated?" It was funny. Not so long ago, he would have felt great trepidation at the thought of fighting an unenhanced Balte Kojiro, but looking at this monstrosity, he felt nothing but confidence. It was as if he'd finally synchronized with himself. All fear, all doubt, had utterly vanished. Now, more than any time previous, he felt as if he was finally himself. This future was wrong. It couldn't possibly be right. It had to be some sort of mistake. It had taken Balte years of training to learn even his most basic precognition, and yet the power of the fusion to a Leviathan had boosted that capacity beyond belief. He could see right through this battle, could count each move before it was made, and witness its conclusion. A defeat. The kind of defeat that would be utterly unacceptable. This had become a battle that he could not possibly win. No matter what strategy he assumed, the result was the same. Positions changed, but the disgrace was identical. Him on the floor, and that fake standing above him, besmirching Negan's face and name. "But didn't you already do that?" he asked himself. "No!" Balte roared, lashing his hand upwards, and in response, massive pillars of toxic crystal burst forth from the ground, spearing towards a toy Muzazi. The attack did not hit. It was never going to hit. The launching of the attack and the blocking of it were mere formalities. Still, Balte Kojiro could not help but rage against fate. That was his nature. Even when faced with the strongest, he could not help but want to surpass it. Even as the sun blinded him, he could not help but grasp for it. The crystal surged towards a toy Muzazi, and a toy Muzazi vanished. Of course, he did not really disappear. Balte understood that before it even happened. He just used his thrusters to launch himself off the ground and out of range, then kicked off the ceiling to fire himself at Balte like a bullet. Kojiro whipped his arm through the air, blocking the strike at the last possible moment. That was not intentional. He blocked it at the last possible moment because that was the best he could do. Even as he blocked it, the crystals on his arm shattered, regenerating a moment later. Next would come an attack to his spine. His armor was sufficient, there was no need to block. Then an attack from above and slightly to the left, striking the joint on his left leg. He allowed it to hit, falling to one knee. Third, a strike to where his eyes had been. There'd be no point to blocking it, as all his crystals now served his eyes. These attacks were always going to hit anyway. Any efforts he could have made would have been fruitless. Rather than needlessly waste energy, he needed to think. He scoured the futures before him, searching for that golden path to victory, and found it. The way he could overcome this lightning-fast foe who was growing faster by the second. Of course, what else could it be? He'd already laid the groundwork for it, after all. "Right," Balte said. "Here we are. I'm not going to lie. They're probably going to want to see what you're made of. I'm right in saying you've got some aches and pains from the trip here, yes?" Muzazi sighed. "Unfortunately so. I apologize. It was a cramped starship, so..." Balte held up a hand, stopping him from going any further. No worries at all. I expected a situation like this, so I grabbed this from the infirmary before meeting with you." He reached into his robes, pulling out a thin and sleek syringe. "Muscle reinforcer. Should keep you on your feet for at least a practice round." "You expected?" Balte laughed. "Yes, Atoy, I just expected. Don't worry, I can't see that far into the future." Oh, did Negan used to get sick from cramped starships? Muzazi mirrored the laugh, taking the syringe from Baltae and injecting it into his arm, not noticing Baltae's intense stare. Mother. Fucker. Toxic pellets, just like the ones that had been used to dispatch Negan the first time. All he had to do was click the trigger, and their poisonous payload would be released. Instant victory. Easily done, but... From the moment she'd been born, Aklama had always felt weak. It was only natural. Her father, who'd never even wanted her in the first place, was the Supreme, the strongest man in the galaxy who nobody could hope to beat. It was only natural to feel inadequate compared to him. But it wasn't just that. As she'd grown up, she'd been surrounded by the strong. Her trainers and tutors, her guards and blades, each and every one of them capable of ending a human life with a wave of their hand. An ordinary human like her simply couldn't compete. No matter how much she trained or how much they taught her, it was fruitless. For years she'd swung her useless sword, and all she'd learnt was how to quickly swing her useless sword. To be honest, she'd entirely given up on becoming strong. Strength to her was something you were born with, not something you could attain. Now, though, looking at this... Aklama pressed her back against the wall. She watched the two titans clash. Baltae fired crystals out of his arms like a shotgun blasts, trying to catch the blue that was a toy Muzazi, but to no avail. I assume Blair that was a toy? He had become so fast that even his afterimage was barely discernible, a watercolor painting its way across the world. When Baltae shot those blasts, he would just smash the walls. When Baltae drove those crystals out of the floor, he would just damage the ceiling. A toy Muzazi went untouched. Aklama knew for a fact that Mr. Muzazi, or Mr. Rush, or whoever he was, hadn't been that fast a moment ago. Before he'd fallen into the pool, he'd been slow enough that Baltae had been able to utterly overpower him. But now the opposite was true. A toy Muzazi had become unmatched. He'd become stronger, right before her eyes, and was becoming stronger by the second. With each strike, he was overcoming himself. Her eyes glimmered in the light. Baltae brought the trigger unit out from within his fusion tool, holding it in his hand. All he had to do was press it. What was he waiting for? Did he really feel the need to look this Atoy Muzazi in the eyes before the end? Why? What did he owe to a simulacrum he'd created? To an imposter claiming the body of his best friend? The sound he'd heard coming finally occurred in reality. The whistle of a blade of heat coming right for him, at the angle that would end the fight. With those first 3 attacks, Atoy Muzazi had determined the composition of this new body, and was now ready to strike the finishing blow. Press it, he urged himself, watching the white blade approach. Press it! Press it! Press it! But Baltae Kojiro did not press it. He couldn't. His heart and his fingers simply would not listen. His hand slackened, and the trigger dropped out of his grip. It clattered on the floor, and the blade struck true. Wow. My throat hurts a little.
I know. So I'm
sorry I kind of went all in. I could heard you trying to commentate earlier, but I wanted to keep
no worries.
Damn. That's my boy. That's my man's. Did you see the look in Aklama's eyes? They are absolutely going to have some sort of like father-daughter mentorship shenanigans going on, and I'm ready for it, Tan. You better deliver. You better deliver! This will be his purpose. Oh my goodness. Wow. What's your lore? Don't tell me to ask you a question.
My lore. The Absurd Weapons Lab is a group in the Supremacy that's been mentioned in the last couple of chapters. They helped Baltae with his whole Negan Rush Toy Muzazi thing. They're basically like the top secret like Aether weapons researchers. They look into the wacky stuff. They know secrets and shit.
Hence the name Absurd.
Yeah. And they also made that a big hacking cube that Jean Lyons was going to use on the Paradisus, but he never got the chance because Muzazi fucking destroyed it.
I love the Absurd Weapons Research Lab as a name. Aural. It kind of comes across like something you'd read in SCP, and I kind of dig it. Alright, guys. Well, thank you for watching, as always. Next week, we'll get the final chapter of the arc, and then that same week, Arc 11.
Yeah.
I'm going to be sad to leave Muzazi after all this build-up, but it's probably time we find Skipper, yeah?
Yeah. Right, well,
right,
yeah.
See you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.